Have you ever felt like everything was finally going right with him? The connection, the chemistry, the late-night talks. And then, almost overnight, he just changed. The warmth in his messages disappeared. The calls became shorter. The effort faded. It's as if someone flipped a switch and the man who once couldn't go a day without hearing from you suddenly acts like you don't exist. It's confusing, isn't it? One moment, you feel chosen, desired, seen. The next, you're left wondering what you did wrong. You replay every conversation in your mind, searching for a sign, a word you said, a moment you missed, something that explains why he suddenly went cold. But the truth is, it's rarely about one thing you did. Most of the time, it's about what's happening inside his mind. When a man suddenly changes his tone, when he pulls back emotionally without warning, it's almost never random. There are deep psychological reasons behind it. And if you don't understand them, you'll end up chasing him, apologizing for things that weren't your fault, and giving away your power without even realizing it. See, men often don't know how to process certain emotions, especially the ones that make them feel weak or out of control. So instead of dealing with what they feel, they withdraw. They go silent. They create distance. It's not always because they stopped caring. Sometimes it's because they started feeling something too strong, something that scared them. But here's the painful truth. When a man goes cold, most women react in a way that pushes him even further away. They try to fix it. They text more. They call. They demand explanations. They ask, "Did I do something wrong?" Or, "Why are you acting different?" And while that reaction comes from love and confusion, to a man's mind, it only confirms his need to retreat even deeper. So before you blame yourself, before you start believing you weren't enough, I want you to pause and understand this. There are two psychological reasons why a man suddenly goes cold. Two invisible triggers that flip in his brain and make him distance himself even when he still wants you. These triggers aren't obvious, but once you understand them, you'll start seeing the pattern in almost every man's behavior. You'll realize that it's not about rejection. It's about fear and control. Imagine this. He was all in. He seemed emotionally open, attentive, maybe even a little vulnerable. Then, at the exact moment you started feeling safe with him, something changed. His messages got shorter. His voice got colder. He stopped saying goodnight. He became unpredictable. One day warm, the next distant. That's not coincidence. That's a psychological defense mechanism. Men are taught from an early age to avoid emotions that make them feel exposed. When he starts to care too much, it triggers something he doesn't know how to handle. That's when you'll see him change. His instincts tell him to retreat, to protect himself from the feeling of losing control. And instead of being honest about it, he becomes distant. And yet there's another type of man, the one who goes cold not because he's scared of feeling too much, but because he's losing interest. And here's where most women get trapped. They can't tell the difference between a man who's scared and a man who's done. One still loves you but doesn't know how to show it. The other already detached emotionally. Understanding which one you're dealing with is the difference between peace and heartbreak. But I'll tell you this, when a man suddenly pulls away, don't panic, don't beg, don't chase. The moment you do, you step into a role that erases his attraction and his respect. Men don't fall for women who try to convince them to stay. They fall for women who stay grounded in their own worth even when he's uncertain about his. Right now, he might be testing something, not consciously, but emotionally. He's observing how you react when he withdraws. Does your world fall apart? Do you fight for him? Or do you remain calm, centered, and mysterious? Because believe it or not, how you respond in this phase determines whether he comes back stronger or disappears completely. The truth is, emotional distance is never random. It's either a sign of fear or detachment, and both have a clear pattern. Once you see it, you'll stop trying to read mixed signals and start reading the truth. And that's what we're going to uncover today. The two deep psychological reasons why a man suddenly goes cold, and what they reveal about his real feelings for you. Are you ready to finally understand what's really happening in his mind? Let's go back to a moment you might know too well. You meet a man who seems different from the rest. He listens when you talk. He laughs at your jokes. He remembers small details, the way you like your coffee, the song you hum when you're nervous, the story about your childhood pet. You start to relax around him. You let your guard down. And for the first time in a long time, you feel like you can be yourself without being judged. At first, everything flows naturally. He texts you good morning before you even open your eyes. He asks about your day. He makes plans. He keeps his promises. You catch yourself smiling at your phone, feeling a warmth you haven't felt in years. And slowly, you start to believe that maybe, just maybe, this one is real. But then something shifts. It doesn't happen in one big argument. It's not after a fight or a misunderstanding, it's subtle. He stops replying as fast. His tone changes. He becomes less curious about your day. The energy that used to pull you in now feels uncertain, like a light slowly dimming. You tell yourself he's just busy. You try to be understanding. But deep down, that quiet intuition inside you starts whispering, something's off. You replay your last conversations, trying to find the exact moment it changed. You wonder if you said something wrong, if you came on too strong, if you were too available. You scroll through old messages, reading them over and over, searching for clues. But what you're really looking for isn't in the words, it's in the silence between them. That silence is where his mind started to shift. See, when a man starts to care deeply, two conflicting forces awaken inside him. The first makes him want to connect, to open up, to share, to trust. The second makes him want to protect himself, to hide, to pull back, to regain control. When those two collide, his behavior starts to feel inconsistent. One day, he's affectionate and warm. The next, he's distant and cold. It's not because he's playing games, it's because he's fighting himself. But here's the cruel part. While he's fighting that inner conflict, you're fighting a different one. You start to question your worth. You wonder why his attention disappeared, why his tone changed, why the man who used to make you feel safe now makes you feel anxious. You overanalyze everything. You start editing your messages, trying not to sound too emotional or too distant. You wait for him to text first. You start to perform instead of simply being. That's how emotional imbalance begins. Not from big betrayals, but from tiny changes that make you doubt yourself. The story of why men go cold often begins long before you even meet them. Many men were taught that emotional control equals strength. They learned that showing care, attachment, or vulnerability makes them weak. So when they start to fall for someone, their subconscious panics. It tells them, you're losing control, you're getting too attached, you're too exposed. And their instinctive reaction is to retreat, to act indifferent, to rebuild the walls that love just began to break. And here's where most women get hurt, because you see his coldness as rejection, but he sees it as self-protection. You feel abandoned while he feels like he's regaining his balance. The irony is, the more you chase, the colder he becomes, not because he doesn't care, but because your pursuit triggers his need to pull away even further. Think of it like a dance. At first, you both move in rhythm, close, connected, trusting. Then suddenly he takes a step back. You feel the distance and instinctively take a step forward. But the closer you move, the more he retreats, until you're left standing alone, wondering how to bring him back. That's why so many women end up emotionally exhausted, because they're trying to fix something that was never their fault. They mistake his confusion for their failure. They take his emotional silence personally, when in truth it's a reflection of what's happening in his inner world, not a reflection of their value. Imagine him sitting alone, scrolling through his phone, seeing your message, and hesitating to reply. He wants to, but something inside tells him not to. Not because he stopped caring, but because he's afraid of feeling too much, afraid of losing control, afraid of being the one who cares more. He'll tell himself he's just busy. He'll convince himself that pulling away is healthy. But deep down, he's testing if the connection can survive his distance. Some women fail this test, not because they aren't enough, but because they respond from fear instead of confidence. They start chasing clarity, when what really restores attraction is calmness. Because when you stay centered, when you don't beg, don't explain, don't overreact, something powerful happens. He realizes he can't control your emotions. He starts to miss your presence, your energy, your silence. And in that space, he begins to feel something he can't get from anyone else: respect. That's when his psychology begins to shift again. The same walls he built to protect himself start to feel like a prison, and the distance he created suddenly feels empty. But by then, your reaction will have determined whether he feels safe enough to come closer, or convinced that you'll always be there waiting no matter how cold he becomes. The story of him going cold isn't just about him. It's about how you handle the emotional gap he creates, because that's where the real power lies. Now that you understand the emotional pattern behind his sudden change, let's go deeper into the two real psychological reasons that explain why men go cold. Because what feels like rejection on the surface often has roots that go far deeper, roots tied to fear, identity, and emotional conditioning. Let's start with the first one, emotional overload. When a man starts to truly connect with you, something unexpected happens inside his mind. At first, he enjoys it, the closeness, the warmth, the attention. It feels good to be wanted and understood. But as that connection deepens, he starts to experience emotions that he doesn't fully understand. Emotions that feel heavy, unpredictable, and unfamiliar. For women, emotional intensity often feels natural. But for many men, it feels threatening, like losing control. You have to remember that most men were not raised to feel deeply. They were raised to manage feelings, to push them down, to stay in control. So when they meet a woman who awakens genuine emotions, affection, desire, vulnerability, their inner system starts to panic. It's like emotional vertigo. They start thinking, why am I feeling so much? Why do I care this much? What if she leaves? What if I get hurt? And instead of sitting with those feelings, they retreat. Not because they stopped caring, but because they care too much. His withdrawal becomes his way of regaining balance. You may see it as him losing interest, but to him, it's about self-preservation. He needs distance to stop feeling overwhelmed. This is the paradox of male psychology. The more a man starts to fall for you, the more he might pull away, temporarily, just to process what's happening. The warmth he once gave you becomes colder not because he stopped loving you, but because his emotional system hit its limit. The second reason is even more hidden, the loss of emotional control. When a man starts falling for a woman, he begins to experience something that challenges his identity, dependency. Emotional dependency is terrifying for many men because it makes them feel vulnerable. Suddenly, his mood depends on whether you reply, his confidence depends on your affection, his peace depends on your attention, and that's when fear creeps in. He starts to realize that someone else has power over his emotions, and that terrifies him, not because he doesn't want love, but because he doesn't know how to stay strong while feeling it. So he pulls away to reassert control, to remind himself that he's not dependent, that he can detach if he needs to. It's not rational, it's instinctive. His mind tells him, if I step back, I'll feel safe again. But what he doesn't realize is that his distance also kills the connection he actually needs. These two reasons, emotional overload and loss of control, are like twin forces that shape how men behave in relationships. One makes him withdraw because he feels too much. The other makes him withdraw because he doesn't want to feel powerless. And together, they create the illusion that he stopped caring. But here's what you must understand. When a man goes cold, it's not your job to heat him back up. It's not your job to prove your worth, to chase, or to decode his silence. Your role is to stay steady while he figures himself out. Because the moment you start reacting emotionally, you feed his fear that the relationship is controlling him, and he'll run even faster. Let's look at what happens inside his mind when you don't react. When he distances himself and you stay calm, something inside him starts to shift. He expects you to panic. He expects you to text more, call, or question him. When you don't, it triggers a different part of his brain, curiosity. Why isn't she chasing me? Did she lose interest? Did she move on? That's when he starts thinking about you again. He replays the last moments you shared. He remembers the things that made you different. And slowly, the same fear that once made him pull away starts making him want to come back. You see, men associate emotional safety with space, but attraction grows from mystery. When you combine those two, calmness and unpredictability, you create a psychological balance that pulls him back without you saying a word. This is why some women seem to effortlessly make men come back, while others chase and lose them completely. The difference isn't beauty or charm or luck, it's emotional mastery. It's the ability to stay composed when his behavior becomes inconsistent. Because when you stay composed, you stop reacting to his fear, and you start controlling the dynamic. Think about it this way. Emotional distance is his way of regaining control. But when you don't react, you take that control back. You show him that your peace doesn't depend on his presence. And nothing attracts a man more than a woman who remains emotionally stable when he expects chaos. Now, this doesn't mean pretending not to care or playing games. It means understanding that his silence has meaning, and that it's not always rejection. When you approach it with calm awareness, you stop personalizing his coldness and start seeing it for what it is, a temporary emotional reset. But here's the crucial point. Sometimes his distance is not temporary. Sometimes his withdrawal isn't about fear. It's about detachment. And knowing how to tell the difference between a man who's scared and a man who's done will save you months, even years, of confusion and pain. The man who's scared will still keep small connections open. He'll check your stories, like your posts, or send small messages out of nowhere. He's distant but still emotionally present. The man who's done disappears completely. No checking, no subtle presence, just silence. The first can be reached through patience and emotional steadiness. The second should be released with grace. So before reacting, before assuming, before chasing, pause. Ask yourself, is he retreating out of fear or disinterest? Is he protecting himself or is he already gone? Because once you can answer that truthfully, you stop operating from emotion and start moving from wisdom. And that's the difference between repeating old patterns and finally breaking them. When you understand these two psychological reasons, emotional overload and fear of losing control, you no longer take his coldness personally. You see it as part of his wiring. You realize it's not about being enough. It's about understanding how male psychology truly works. And that awareness gives you power. Because once you understand what's really happening, you stop chasing closure and start creating peace. Here's the truth most people never tell you. How you react during the cold phase determines everything that happens next. Because when a man pulls away, the emotional space that opens up between you becomes a mirror. It shows him exactly who you are under pressure, and it shows you exactly what kind of connection you're dealing with. Most women make one of two mistakes in this moment. The first is panic, rushing to close the gap with texts, calls, or emotional confessions. The second is pride, pretending not to care while secretly waiting for him to come back. Both reactions come from fear, and fear always pushes him further away. When a man senses your panic, he feels trapped. When he senses your indifference, he feels dismissed. But when he senses calm confidence and that quiet energy that says, "I'm fine either way," something powerful happens. His psychological defenses start to crack. Men are naturally drawn to balance. When you become emotionally steady while he's unstable, you become his equilibrium. But when you match his instability with yours, when you react to his coldness with anxiety or anger, you confirm his belief that emotional closeness is dangerous, and that's when he starts building higher walls. If you want to reach him again, you have to understand how his mind interprets your behavior. When he pulls away, every message you send carries a meaning much deeper than the words themselves. "Are you okay?" doesn't sound like care to him, it sounds like pressure. "I miss you" doesn't sound romantic. It sounds like emotional responsibility. Even a simple "good morning" can remind him that he's disappointing you. And instead of drawing him closer, it reminds him why he distanced himself in the first place. But silence, controlled, graceful silence, has the opposite effect. It gives him room to breathe. It lets his mind wander. It forces him to feel the absence he tried to create. You see, when a man goes cold, he expects you to chase. When you don't, you break the pattern he's used to. And that's when his curiosity begins to wake up again. He starts thinking about you more, not less. He replays old moments. He wonders if you're moving on. That's when his ego and his emotions start fighting each other. The same battle that made him pull away now starts pulling him back. But here's where the urgency lies. If you chase during that phase, the damage can become permanent. Because once a man feels that your emotional balance depends on him, his respect starts to fade. Respect is the foundation of attraction, and without it, no amount of love can hold him. So, if he suddenly goes cold, you must resist every instinct to react emotionally. Instead, respond psychologically. Don't text him asking what happened. Don't try to prove your loyalty. Don't show frustration. Just shift your energy inward. That doesn't mean cutting him off. It means cutting off the supply of attention he's using to feel safe in his distance. Because whether he realizes it or not, your attention is what keeps him in control. The moment you take it back, you reset the balance of power. You see, there's a crucial difference between waiting and detaching. Waiting is passive. It keeps you stuck in hope. Detaching is active. It puts your focus back on yourself, your growth, your peace. And paradoxically, that's what often draws him back. Not the words you say, but the silence you hold. But if you fail to understand the psychology behind his coldness, you'll end up in a cycle, chasing, losing, rebuilding, and chasing again. That cycle slowly erodes your self-esteem, because each time he goes cold, you'll blame yourself a little more. You'll start believing you're too much, too emotional, too demanding, and he'll start believing he can disappear and return whenever he wants. That's why this phase is not just emotional, it's psychological warfare. You have to protect your peace like it's your power, because it is. Every time you resist the urge to reach out, you're teaching him something about you, that your value isn't negotiable, and that his silence doesn't define your worth. The women who master this stage, who learn to stay calm while he's distant, always come out stronger, no matter how the story ends. Because whether he comes back or not, they come back to themselves. And here's the paradox. When you stop needing him to warm up, he often does. When you stop demanding clarity, he starts offering it. When you stop asking for love, he starts remembering why he felt it in the first place. That's the power of understanding his psychology. You stop playing defense and start playing from awareness. You stop reacting to his coldness and start controlling the emotional temperature of the connection. But there's one more layer to this. What happens if you stay calm, composed, patient, and he still doesn't come back? What does that silence mean? What if his distance wasn't about fear at all? What if it was a message you weren't supposed to fix but to hear? Because sometimes the coldness isn't a test, it's an answer. And knowing the difference between the two, that's what will save you from chasing ghosts. So why did he suddenly go cold? Because at some point the emotions became too real for him to handle. Either the connection triggered fear, the fear of losing control, of feeling too much, of becoming emotionally dependent, or it revealed something even deeper, that he wasn't ready for the kind of love he thought he wanted. And that's the reality most women overlook. When a man retreats, it's not always because of you. It's often because of the emotional mirror you held up to him. You made him feel something he didn't know how to process. Affection, intimacy, vulnerability. For a man who spent years protecting himself from those emotions, that's not comfort, it's confrontation. But here's what separates women who suffer from those who grow: awareness. When you understand his psychology, his silence loses its power. His distance stops feeling personal. You no longer see it as a rejection of your worth, but as a reflection of his internal limits. And when you reach that level of clarity, you respond differently. Instead of begging for closure, you become closure. Instead of proving your value, you embody it. Instead of reacting to his withdrawal, you give it meaning, by showing him that your peace doesn't depend on his presence. Because the truth is, love doesn't need to be chased. It reveals itself in consistency, in effort, in communication. When those things disappear, you don't lose love, you just lose illusion. Now, if he's meant for you, if his coldness came from fear, not indifference, your calmness will draw him back. Not because you waited, but because you didn't. You kept living, growing, evolving. You showed him that the connection doesn't control you. You control your energy within it. And if he never comes back, that's not loss. That's direction. It's the universe removing someone who wasn't emotionally capable of loving you the way you deserve. Because the woman who understands male psychology learns one fundamental truth. A man who truly wants you will always move toward you, not away from you. He won't hide behind confusion or silence. He won't make you guess. He'll show up, consistently, clearly, intentionally. So the next time a man goes cold, don't rush to fix it. Observe it. Let his silence speak. Because sometimes the quietest moments reveal the loudest truths. And while he's trying to figure out what he feels, focus on what you deserve. Your power isn't in convincing him. It's in knowing that no man's hesitation can reduce your worth. The more you honor that truth, the more magnetic you become. So take a deep breath. Let go of the anxiety. Let go of the need for answers. Because the moment you stop chasing clarity from him, you start finding it within yourself. He may have gone cold, but you don't have to. Stay grounded, stay calm, stay radiant. The right man won't make you question your value. He'll recognize it from the very beginning, and he'll never risk losing it. And remember, understanding a man's psychology isn't about controlling him. It's about freeing yourself from confusion. Because when you understand why he goes cold, you'll never again let silence steal your peace.